Gospel 1440 AM is WMKM, Inkster, Detroit. Welcome back to the family.
Good morning. This is Cynthia A. Johnson with Stand Up Now. Thank you for tuning in to this show. I hope you find this half hour enjoyable and inspiring as we showcase regular people from the city of Detroit who are doing great things and really making a difference in our city, the city of Detroit. Good morning, family. This is Stand Up Now with Cynthia A. Johnson, and you're listening to us on the great Gospel 1440 WMKM Reborn. We're going to do something a little differently this morning, and we have a special guest in studio. Young thing, but she's old enough. Her name is Tracy E. Green. She's a candidate for Third Circuit Court Judge. I want you to remember that name, Tracy E. Green, candidate for Third Circuit Court Judge. Our phone numbers here are 313-871-6094 and 313-871-6095. We also have in studio my dear friend and today's special co-host, Tanya Britt. Good morning, both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us. Like I told you, was talking to you, Tracy, before we went on air. You're going to tell us why we need to elect you, but we are also going to talk about men and women issues. Mm-hmm. So again, our phone numbers here are 313-871-6094 and 313-871-6095. And of course, I would be remiss not to mention and thank my dear engineer, Miss Irene Washington. Good morning, Irene. And of course, thank all of you for joining us here on Stand Up Now with Cynthia A. Johnson. And we can be heard worldwide by going to www.gospel1440.com. Again, that's www.gospel1440.com. Tell your friends, tell your family, ask them to tune in right now. Tell us a little bit about you, Miss Green.
Well, I'm happy to be here, first of all. And again, I thank you for your invitation. I am running for Third Circuit Court Judge. I am a qualified, experienced attorney seeking that position. I've been practicing for 20 years.
Whoa!
Wow.
Oh, my God.
I was a little tickled when you referred to me as a young lady because my mother would certainly think I'm a young lady. She just celebrated her 88th birthday last week, but I'm not quite as young as I used to be. I'm actually 50 years old, and I'm proud
goodness. Look at that.
I'm proud to say I've been blessed
God
to
is awesome.
live 50 years, yes.
What did they say about black?
Okay.
It don't crack.
It doesn't crack.
I said it don't crack.
I say
It
black,
don't crack.
beautiful, and highly favored.
Oh,
Amen.
my goodness.
Amen.
You are absolutely
Okay.
gorgeous.
I
Thank
thought
you.
she was
Thank
about
you.
28.
I did too.
And then she said
So
she's
you
been
two are my new
practicing
best
for 20
friends.
years. I said 8 years old. So
But look at you, Tanya. You used to not even want to talk about your age.
And we won't today.
Okay. All right.
Well, as I was saying, I've been practicing for 20 years, and I have been recognized by the Michigan Supreme Court's Foster Care Review Board for my work in child welfare. Most of my practice has been focused on child welfare, which is the child abuse and neglect cases, CPS cases. But I have extensive experience as well in criminal law and in general civil family law matters. Going back to the recognition by the Supreme Court, it was an award for Parents' Attorney of the Year, and that was in 2010. I was the first recipient of that award, and there have been several since my being bestowed. But I'm very proud that I was the first recipient of that award and that it came from such a notable source, being the Michigan Supreme Court. I am currently the legal director of the Detroit Center for Family Advocacy, which is actually right up the street on West Grand Boulevard. It took me probably 5 minutes or less to get to the studio today from there. And what we do there, in a nutshell, is do all that we can to preserve families and keep children from going into foster care. And I have a lot of opinions about the foster care system, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But what we do at Detroit Center for Family Advocacy is focus on cases that are referred to us by the Department of Human Services, either through CPS or their counterparts in foster care. And they identify cases where there's a collateral legal issue that, if resolved, will allow them to feel confident that the child will be safe in the care of a relative or even a parent in some instances.
What is collateral legal issues?
So a collateral legal issue is one that is not actually in the juvenile court case or in the CPS investigation itself, but one that impacts it. For example, if CPS conducts an investigation, determines that the child abuse or neglect is really related to defects in the home, and it's the landlord's responsibility to correct those defects, then we might sue the landlord to get the landlord to correct those defects so that CPS believes that the children will be safe in the home. So we're not actually working in the CPS investigation, but we're working on a collateral matter that impacts that investigation. Another example would be if a child is a ward of the juvenile court. So CPS has already conducted an investigation. They've filed a petition to place the child under the jurisdiction of the court because they've determined that they've substantiated abuse or neglect, and the court has taken jurisdiction and made that child a ward. But either the court or then the foster care worker believes that perhaps the other parent only needs to get a custody order in order for the child to be expedited out of the juvenile court case. Then we might represent that parent, help that parent file the necessary documents in circuit court to either change custody or establish custody if that parent was not the parent who was the perpetrator of the abuse or neglect. There are lots of different examples, and what I like to tell people is that we are a general niche practice. So our niche is that all of our cases impact a child welfare circumstance or case. But we will do just about anything within the confines of the law, landlord-tenant, criminal law, sometimes appeals, guardianship, anything that you can imagine, if resolved, might allow a child to remain safely out of foster care or accelerate that child's exit from foster care and juvenile court jurisdiction, and we handle those matters. So it's niche because it's all relating to family preservation and child safety, but it's general because we really will do just about anything. We will analyze the case and determine, well, how is it that we can use our legal and social work acumen to affect this case, because we're multidisciplinary. We have a master's level social worker who works with us. And currently, we're affiliated with the University of Michigan's law school. So sometimes we have interns from the various law schools around the state. We're very fortunate here in Michigan that we have a number of very good law schools. And so oftentimes we have interns, especially in the summer, that help us pick up the slack in terms of man or woman power, if you will. And we also have been very fortunate to have had a number of volunteer attorneys who have offered their time pro bono to assist us in the work, because it's important to work. The point of our work really at its core is family preservation. And that's either preservation of a family by keeping a child from going into foster care, or family preservation in that we're trying to get a child to return to a family. And because all of our cases are referred by either the court or the Department of Human Services, we have a lot of collaborative opportunities with those stakeholders. So it's very gratifying work. We've been at it now for 7 years. We started in 2009, and it will be our 7th year actually in July.
So you're the director. Are you the one of the founders?
I'm not the founder, but I have been there since day one. The founder is a professor at University of Michigan's law school child advocacy law clinic, and his name is Vivek Sankaran. I'm the legal director. So what I do is guide the legal advocacy, and I also supervise the social worker to ensure that our work is collaborative. And it's very gratifying because I practiced in private practice for a number of years without a social worker, and now that I am very privileged to work with one, I realize this is the only way to do child welfare work, where you have a lawyer and a social worker who's dedicated to the family and not necessarily seen as an adversary to the family, because oftentimes the caregivers, typically the parents, see the child protective services worker or the foster care worker as an adversary. And there's good reason, because even though they're doing their jobs, they have the power to influence the court and to determine whether a child will be removed from a family or whether a child will be returned to a family. But our organization allows families to have access to that social work component without the fear that's associated with dealing with someone who could potentially turn table and not necessarily work to your advantage.
All right, that trust factor is very important.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to take a commercial. You're listening to Stand Up Now with Cynthia A. Johnson, and our special guest here today is Miss Tracy E. Green. She's a candidate for Third Circuit Court Judge. Her name will be on the ballot on August 2nd, 2016. And we want you to look for that name, that person, and we want you to do some research on all people. Don't just vote just to be voting, but please do your research and your homework on each and every person who's vying for your vote. I believe in you, and you definitely have my vote.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. We all know that sometimes life happens, things that we least expect. And that's why Sparkle Builders Emergency Restoration is here to help. What is Sparkle Builders? I'm glad you asked.
You got 3 parts to your claim. Money's for repairs, that's to the dwelling. You got monies for contents, which is your personal items. You got monies for ALE, which is additional living expenses for you to stay outside your home. So we make sure you get everything from your insurance company without being lowballed.
With over 40 years of experience, Sparkle Builders is a licensed emergency board-up and temporary repair specialist. Call Sparkle Builders, 313-271-7000. So if you have a house fire, lightning strike, tree fall, basement flood, or anything with an insurance adjustment, call Dwayne Garner, 24 hours a day, 313-912-2321.
When you have a disaster, you have a loss, whether it's storm damage, lightning, fire, contact your insurance company, report your claim. Then at the same time, contact Sparkle Builders. You want someone standing there with you as your advocate to keep the adjuster's estimate honest. That's what we do as a company.
You definitely want to contact Sparkle Builders if in the unfortunate situation you have a fire, a flood, anything that has to do with you having to contact your homeowner's insurance. Of course, if you have one of those things, you want to contact your insurance company first, but contact Sparkle Builders next so that they can make sure that you are not given less than what you so rightfully deserve. Coming back to my guest, Tracy E. Green, who is one of the candidates for Third Circuit Court Judge, and Ms. Tanya Britt. We talked during the commercial, and we decided that this issue is so important that we're going to stick on it, and we will kind of talk about men and women relationships. And this is sort of, not really sort of, it really has to do with
Family.
the man and the woman
And
the family. And you were talking about, Tanya, that you were
I was
a foster.
a former foster parent for many years in San Diego, California, San Diego County. And I've seen many children come into my home who should not have been taken from their home. Disciplinary. A child stole money out the purse. The mom spanked her, and they took the children from them, which caused the 2 girls I had in my custody to have eating disorders, start cutting themselves. The mom was charged with a potential felony because she spanked the child for taking money out of her purse. And so that's just one of the instances. Then I had a family from Russia. They only spoke Russian. And I had their children in my home. The child had a bruised leg, and they assumed that she had been abused by her family because she had a fractured leg. I had the baby in the crib. The baby did a high-flying move and jumped out of the crib while she was in my care, so I know strong baby, gymnastic type, future possibility. So I knew what kind of things she was capable of doing. This was like a 2-year-old baby, an infant jumped out of the crib and landed on her feet. So I'm just saying that's possibly what happened to injure. Fortunately, the parents were able to get their child back. But how stressful for the children not to speak English and to be in my home. And I made them as comfortable as possible, but there was a communication barrier. And the family were so grateful. I'd meet up with the family so they could see the children, But it touches my heart because there's people who have their children taken from them who shouldn't have their children taken from them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The problem in our child welfare system, and it's not just Michigan, it's really nationwide. I've had the opportunity to go to several different states and train other attorneys, train other child welfare workers, and I find that it's very similar across the board, that there's what I've heard referred to as a culture of removal, where rather than do a thorough investigation and determine whether the risk of removing the child outweighs the risk of keeping the child in the home.
It's very traumatic for the children.
There's this rush to remove the child, and I understand it because we're talking about children. They're the most vulnerable of our society. The CPS workers are overworked. They have far too many cases. So there's a reactionary culture in removing the children first and perhaps doing an investigation or a thorough investigation later, if at all. But once the child is in the juvenile court system, the parents are given, if their rights aren't terminated at the outset, the parents are given an opportunity to comply with a service plan agreement. And oftentimes, they're unsuccessful in completing that service plan, but it's not necessarily because they don't desire to do it. There are transportation issues. There are resource issues. Most of the families that are involved in child welfare are predominantly low income, which means in this area, at least, they're predominantly African American. So this child welfare system is one that disproportionately affects black families. And as far as relationships go between men and women and how it relates to this issue, I cannot stress enough the frustration that I experience when I see typically mothers, but sometimes fathers, whoever is the primary caregiver for a child, fighting tooth and nail to get against their child going with the other parent, when the other parent would be able to keep the child out of the foster care system, because that custodial parent doesn't realize that although you may not get along with your child's father,
that's right,
that child's father can keep you potentially from ultimately losing your parental rights. Because if you're not able to complete that service plan, the state is going to be looking at filing a petition to terminate your parental rights. And 9 times out of 10, if that petition is filed, it's successful. So sometimes I'm finding myself urging women to put their personal feelings for the father aside.
Yeah, that's right.
At some point, you liked that man pretty well.
That's
because
right.
you had a child, sometimes more than one child with this man. Put your personal feelings aside. Allow him to take the children into his home so that the CPS case can be closed or the juvenile court case can be closed. And then you can, if you still want to have custody of your children, challenge him for custody in the Domestic Relations Division of the Third Circuit Court. That's the division that, or the section that handles divorce, child custody, child support, etc. Once juvenile court is no longer involved, parents always have the opportunity to pursue custody in that section. And in that section, there's no risk of termination of parental rights. So it's just something that really needs to be stressed across our community, because I've started out my work in child welfare as a foster care caseworker. So adding even an additional 5 years, I've been doing this work for 25 years. And I can't tell you how many times I've encountered women who think that if they don't give CPS the father's number, it's going to allow them to keep their child. Or if they say bad things about the father, it's going to allow them to keep their child.
I'm going to tell you something, Tracy. I just don't understand this. As you've already said, if you have children with this man, regardless if you like him or not, as long as I'm concerned, as long as he is not a drug dealer or he can put the child in further harm.
Irresponsible.
Right. As long as he's not an irresponsible man, please don't make the child or the children suffer because you can't stand this man.
And sometimes it's the man who loses custody of the children, and there's no mother involved. I had one instance where the father did get his child back. The father still had to prove that he was able to take his child. And unfortunately, he was blessed to get his child back.
And that's a good thing.
And this was not African American. This was another nationality. But I'm just saying there are fathers in the system who want their children too.
But I guess what I'm really saying is that the vast majority of the parents who are the custodial parents happen to be women. And I see so often, too often, where women, sisters, women of all races who try to get at the man or punish him by keeping the child or the children away from their father.
What I think it is it's ignorance about the system. The women are facing, when CPS is threatening to remove the child, they're facing the most frightening point of their lives.
And they feel powerless.
And they feel powerless, certainly. And they think, if I don't provide the information about the other parent, CPS will just allow me to keep my child. So it's not a choice between allowing you to keep your child or allowing the father. It's really a choice between allowing the father or the child going into foster care. But they don't see that at the outset. They're scared. The person who has the information, which would be the CPS worker, is not someone they see as an ally. So they don't have any reason to attribute any credibility to the CPS worker. And so what I try to do is talk to women as often as I can when I'm encountering these cases and explain to them, you are not doing yourself any favors by standing in the way of the child going with the father. You are keeping that child inside the system, and that's the only system that could potentially terminate your parental rights if you're not successful in accomplishing all of the items on your service plan. And many women are not successful.
And
That's
not
very
only
sad.
that is another way for think of it like this. We have a lot of children who are angry.
Yes.
And some of us, we don't realize or know why they're angry. Well, I can tell you why they're angry. They've gone into the system. They're away from their parents. And in part, if you're a part of this, and we know that you're scared, we know that you don't know perhaps what to do, but don't keep your children away from a responsible father. He may not be the one for you.
Yes, but he's family.
But he's family for that child.
And also there are some upstanding foster parents. I was one of them. But there are some who just want to benefit from the system and don't have the child's best interests at heart. And many have lost their lives by being taken from their home and put into foster care.
That's right.
True. That's very true. There are a number of children who are at risk, a great number of children who are at risk. And CPS goes out and determines whether the child is more at risk at the home or as being removed from the home. The problem that I see is that there's not enough emphasis on that risk-benefit analysis. Again, what I was saying before about the culture of removal, CPS will oftentimes remove the child for erring on the side of safety of the child, not considering that there are detriments to removing the child as well. It may be a lesser evil in some instances, but in many instances, it's unnecessary, which would mean that it's a greater evil. And these are the people you see in our society who are very socially disengaged, have disproportionately represented in the mental health system, disproportionately represented in the penal system. They're disproportionately represented in the homeless population, all stemming from a bout in foster care. And that, again, I can't stress enough that it's not that foster care is bad in and of itself. It's necessary.
It's very necessary.
It's necessary, but it is not necessary in all the instances where it occurs.
Right.
And our organization tries to keep children who don't need to be there out of the system.
Yes.
Amen.
Amen.
Is there anything else that you want to leave with the audience about your candidacy?
I just want to say I think she's a very worthy candidate. Children are our future. Children are important, and they need to be loved and appreciated, and their feelings should be taken in consideration before they're taken from their home and their families.
Well, I'm grateful for this opportunity, and I'd just like to add that I'm a lifelong resident of Wayne County. I graduated from Cass Technical High School.
Okay.
Oh, she's a techie.
And I'm a techie. And
I
graduated. I graduated from Wayne State University with Bachelor's of Social Work degree and law degree.
Okay.
I am a wife, a mother, a grandmother of 7.
Wow.
I enjoy my grandmotherhood. Yes, ma'am. And my judicial philosophy is one that stresses from the bench fairness, dignity, and respect, because these days the judiciary has not at all been one where our public has a lot of confidence, and it's something I'd like to do something about. I'd like for people to know that if they leave my courtroom, they're going to leave with their dignity upheld, no matter what the outcome. My slogan is Go Green for Justice, so I can be remembered on the August 2nd primary, and my website is gogreenforjustice.org if they want to learn more about my candidacy.
All right, that's Tracy E. Green. She is a candidate for Third Circuit Court Judge, and she will be on the ballot August 2nd. Please remember that person and her name and do your homework. God bless you all. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And my friend, Tanya Britt.
Here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome.
I think she's a very worthy candidate.
She is. That's Tracy E. Green. This is Stand Up Now with Cynthia A. Johnson. Thank you, family, for joining us. You know I love y'all. Bye.
Maybe then they'll listen to what you have to say. They're the ones who's coming up